when people think about overcoming sin in their lives, you mentioned at the beginning of the book that this is a theme that often gets sort of short shrift today. Either people are not thinking about that sin is a reality touching their lives. It might just be a theological category, but you bring out very wisely in a number of ways let's call it the existential manifestations that sin has in people's lives as sort of an entry point to say, look, sin is clinging to you or impacting you, or you're clinging to it in ways that, you know what, you're not maybe aware of, and it has damaging effects.
Yeah, we believe as Catholic Christians, we have an intellect to know and a will to choose. And when I preach that truth of our faith to my congregations, say at the parish missions or a weekend retreat or a men's retreat I have coming up, I'm going to be saying the same thing, because we're touching upon this very subject matter. I like to point to my brain, my head, and my heart. We have an intellect to know and a will to choose. Why do I point to the heart when I say and a will to choose? Because we always choose based on a love. Now, it may be a disordered love, or it possibly could be an ordered love. And poetically speaking, across cultures and across times, the human heart is seen as a symbol, an anchor, a vestige of love. So again, we have an intellect to know and a will to choose, what the church would call in her teaching, her moral teaching, the good, the true, and the beautiful in concrete daily actions. And if we're not doing that, we become skewed in the moral life. And either wittingly or unwittingly, depending on how well the intellect is informed, we can lead ourselves down a very dark road.
Mm-hmm. Father, you mentioned one of the beautiful gifts in this book, overcoming the evil within, and Cardinal Burke brings it out in his promotion of your book, is the number of saints that you use as sources of confirmation or insight or foundational teaching about the nature of sin. Not only do you reference the scriptures and the catechism, but lots of quotes about the saints. And one of the quotes in the early chapters talks about the fact that when we sin, we actually hurt ourselves even more than we cause some kind of damage in the world, that there's a damage that comes to our own lives. And I'm not sure that folks are always thinking about that so much, that it darkens our intellect, it weakens our will, it disorders our passions, it increases concupiscence. These are these negative effects of sin that it has on our lives. Yeah, I'll just stop there. You're ready to jump in and say something. So.
Yeah, the full title of the book, as you well know, is Overcoming the Evil Within, the Reality of Sin and the Transforming Power of God's Grace and Mercy. And I open up in the introduction, as you know, Tom, with the savage murder of Saint Maria Goretti at age 11 by 20-year-old Alessandro Serenelli, who was a self-admitted lust addict, and he stabbed her 14 times upon her refusing his advancement to rape her. And she would not acquiesce. And she's a martyr of the church for the virtues of purity and modesty. And yet she had one thing on her mind the following morning, just before she died. She died about 23 hours after the attack. And her mother, Assunta Goretti, was sitting at her hospital bed at the foot of the bed. And Maria told her mother, Mama, pray for Alessandro, that I may one day see him in heaven. And through a series of events that are quite miraculous, Alessandro ends up having a wonderful, wonderful conversion while serving his 29-year prison sentence. And when he gets out, he's an absolutely completely changed man. So much so that today in 2022, there's a group of laity in Italy that are attempting to have Alessandro's cause introduced for sainthood through its proper process, beginning with servant of God, then declared venerable, then beatification, but ultimately to sainthood. So overcoming the evil within, the reality of sin, and the transforming power of God's grace and mercy. So Alessandro ended up recognizing the evil that he did indeed do. And this dovetails with your last point, leading into this statement now from myself. He got it. He got the memo of the reality of sin, that it was taking him down a dark path to the point of murdering this poor young girl. And true, she appeared to him in prison, but still, and that had a lot to do with his conversion, but still, he had an intellect to know that he did wrong and a will now to choose the good and to not continue to go down that wrong path and let prison life harden him even more. And so that was a beautiful reality of Alessandro's life. And so, there's a great quote by Archbishop Fulton Sheen. He says, God writes his name on the soul of every human person. And that makes sense because we're made in God's image and likeness. God writes his name on the soul of every human person. And that kind of dovetails with 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 15 and 16. Become holy yourselves in every aspect of your conduct, after the likeness of the Holy One who has called you. Remember, Scripture says, be holy as I am holy. So if God has written his name on every human heart, and we're called to be holy as God is holy, because we are precisely made in his image and likeness, then we have to make sure to train our intellects, train our wills to always choose the good, the true, and the beautiful, as opposed to the opposite of that, which would be the false, the bad, the false, and the ugly, as opposed to the good, the true, and the beautiful, and to choose the good, the true, and the beautiful, where the human heart yearns to one day serve an eternity with its creator for just that, all eternity. And Alessandro got this memo.